Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us in your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description. You'll bypass the Apple upcharge, get access to 10 different channels, including our draft and transaction channels, and 2 special host updates. Also, we'll restart the stage shows in the off-season. Check it out. It's Off the Floor. Link right here in the description. Also, subscribe to Prize Picks. Use the code 5 there when you start. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and it is legal in the state of Florida. So make sure you use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick. And at 5 Reasons Sports, I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Gregg Sylvander. We are fully into off-season coverage here. Check out the 2 episodes that we did off the exit interview day. We're still waiting to hear from Pat Riley. It may happen this week. It may happen the week after, but it's supposed to happen relatively soon. We're going to be playing off some of the events in the NBA as well. We may do separate episodes for these, but just to note, LeBron James out of the postseason, still 2 titles with Miami, 1 title with Cleveland, 1 title with the Lakers. Still where we're at. Spent 4 years in Miami, same number of titles with the Heat as with all other teams combined. Luka Doncic goes out in the first round. That may be something we talk about a little bit later because
eyeball emoji.
Right. Eyeball emoji. Is he definitely going to resign with the Lakers when he has the opportunity? I still believe that he will, but again, adds a little bit of intrigue to it. In the Eastern Conference, a couple of things that are playing out. I mean, the Knicks playing the Celtics, not really a huge surprise here. Cleveland, Indiana. Again, Cleveland, the Garland comments that Kyle Anderson made got a little bit of attention about how the Cavs are better without him, but that story has since passed. And the Pacers, with Rick Carlisle coaching, interesting because that gets into something we're going to talk about today. But the Pacers going this deep into the playoffs, 2 straight seasons, is something to take note of, I think, because I don't think we believed that they were on so much of a higher plane than the Heat starting 2 years ago. But clearly, at this stage, no way to argue it. They are. So a lot of things that we will get into as we go forward. Also likely to do an episode about Kevin Durant and what happens there. And, of course, the Giannis stuff. So we'll probably dig into that on a bigger night, maybe a Sunday night going into a Monday morning. But right now, the news in the NBA is that Gregg Popovich is retiring, and as coach at least, and that Mitch Johnson, just 38 years old, is going to be taking over for the San Antonio Spurs. Now, why would we talk about this first? Best wishes to Pop and everything that in his life. Obviously, the health problem this year led to this. The first thing, Mitch Johnson is actually the same age Erik Spoelstra was when he took over the Miami Heat back in 2008. Very similar situation other than the health part of it, in that you had a legendary coach who was not continuing and appointed somebody who was sort of not that well known on his own staff instead of going out and getting somebody with a name. Mitch Johnson's not somebody that we thought was going to be this guy a couple of years ago. We thought Becky Hammond maybe when she was there, James Borrego, Mike Brown. There's a lot of coaches who've come up through the Spurs system. They're going with Mitch Johnson. So, again, something to talk about here because there is some similarity to Erik Spoelstra. But the other way that this involves Erik Spoelstra, why we decided to do this podcast today, is that he is now the longest-tenured coach in the NBA with his current team. At one time when Carlisle was with Dallas, it was like Spo was like either 3 days before or 3 days after Carlisle, but of course Carlisle's not with Dallas anymore. And coaches turn over all the time, and Erik Spoelstra has kind of made it a cause of his to criticize any coach firing that ever happens in any place. He has job security. He signed an 8-year extension a couple of years ago. And he's coming off a season that I think we can classify as not his best, at least in terms of the on the court stuff. What we didn't see behind the scenes, what he was dealing with the Jimmy Butler stuff, which is something that was highlighted by a lot of people at the exit interviews. It seemed to be a cause of the Heat media machine, and I mean the internal machine, because they posted a couple of IG videos of players being asked about how Spo kept the team together. So there seemed to be an emphasis on that. But the on-the-court product was problematic, and so were some decisions. There was one that was very uncharacteristic, which cost the game in Detroit, and calling a timeout that he didn't have. You don't see him make those kind of mistakes typically. And then you also look at some of the rotation stuff. You had Bam say at the press conference after the season that he was begging Spoelstra to play Ware more earlier in the year. It never seemed like a rotation was settled on, even before the Jimmy thing got really ugly. After that, sort of understandable, and then he had to put a team together on the fly. So obviously a lot of factors, Greg, played into this, that he didn't have all the variables maybe working in his favor. But I think most would say 37 and 45, even if you win 2 play-in games, but then you get destroyed in the first round of the playoffs, would make you think that you've got to do a little bit of self-evaluation, which he said he would do. Your view on his season, and then as we talk about him going forward.
It was probably as tough a season as I can remember from Spo. And I mean that primarily from a tactical perspective, like some of the stuff that you outlined throughout the season, the timeout stuff, sticking with Terry and I guess even Jaime for so long. I mean, there was lots of questionable stuff that I think Terry in particular, there were just so many numbers that pointed to get him the hell off the court, and that just didn't happen. And so it was just uncharacteristic from a Spoelstra perspective, like on court. Off the court, it was a really, and I'm going to use this word continuously, tumultuous season that he had to manage. So, you know, like it's hard to, I guess, understand how much of that bleeds over onto the court and what is truly just tactics versus strategic stuff that's more, high level thinking versus just in the nitty gritty, the timeout stuff, things like that. But it wasn't a great season from him. I think that it leaves him with something to prove, which, I mean, when I say that, I mean relative to the way that the season went, not relative to his career. He's obviously as decorated as a head coach can be, and he's got as much job security as possible. But it's interesting. He continues to talk about how much he gets reinvigorated by certain processes, and he emphasizes that, and he always uses that as an adjective when he talks about like getting through some of these tougher times, years where they haven't been at the very top, or if they've gotten close. He talks about how that reinvigorates him. And so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out for him. And this is the last thing I'll close with, because not only did Mitch Johnson get hired for San Antonio, but Memphis made a decision on their franchise's next head coach. And so it's 2 organizations that have already made head coaching hires before kind of the whole cycle gets started. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's also something to be said for that. Chris Quinn, I thought, would be a key candidate in a place like Memphis. And maybe this is a whole other show, but I think that it does, it'll be interesting to see how the staff is managed beyond Erik Spoelstra, just by virtue of that. There's Chris Quinn, and then we've talked about, do they need another kind of voice on that staff going forward? But for Spoelstra, there's clearly things he can take from this year and try to build on for next year and just try to button up. It's not anything, obviously, that's career defining for a guy like him.
Well, the coaching cycle now, it does seem like a lot of the teams are going to get away from the retreads. I think we've seen that, like Phoenix. Like Phoenix has tried Vogel. They've tried Budenholzer, right? Like at a certain point, okay, Mike Brown might get hired again. Who knows? But it does seem like more teams are trying to do what the Heat did successfully back in 2008, which was bring in a guy in the organization who kind of knows the system and try to build off that, maybe take it a little bit different way. That's what happened in Boston, by the way. I mean, Udoka was pushed out. Obviously, he's an elite coach. We saw that with Houston this year. But then they moved in an assistant from his staff and Missoula, and he's won a championship. So that ended up working out. So I think you'll see more teams doing this now rather than going out and grabbing the coach. I mean, the Lakers added Redick because he was a really bright guy on ESPN and LeBron's podcast co-host. And I don't know. I mean, he didn't have the success that some beleaguered coaches have had, at least in the postseason. He did in the regular season, but Darvin Ham had more success in the postseason than Redick has had. So there's all kinds of ways to go about this. I think you make a good point about the assistants. And I said this flat out, so I'm going to say it again. I said it last year. I think they need to add one. I do. And it's no disrespect to the former Heat players who are on the staff, whether it's Quinn or whether it's Malik Allen or whether it's Caron Butler, or who am I forgetting? AC is out now. So, Wayne Ellington, right? Eric Glass, of course, has been there a while. He didn't play for the Heat, but he's come up kind of the Spo way. But I just think, look, he was asked about the offense, okay? Spo was, and he said that they were starting to get it together. And again, I understand the difficult, and then it sort of fell apart again. I understand the difficulties of the season. I get it. He does not have a team with great offensive talent. I mean, after Jimmy left, they got, basically Tyler trying to create, and that's about all that they had. I mean, Davion Mitchell playing above his head, Wiggins when he played at times, but the team lacks creation. It still lacks some athleticism. It's the shooting, there's enough, but it's not elite beyond Tyler and Duncan and Burks. And again, Duncan and Burks are not guys you're going to play all the time. So he does not have all the tools that you would want. But even with that said, this is consistent 18th to 23rd in the league offenses over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And, for a guy who during the Big Three era went around the country and met with Chip Kelly and other football coaches to innovate and innovated around the Big Three and the way they, pace and space and all those kind of things. I mean, again, I'm not as equipped as Brady and Alex to evaluate this stuff, but I'm not seeing that much. I don't know. I'm not seeing that much innovation as we saw before. And again, maybe it is limited.
I think that's fair.
Is that? Because then we're like, okay, they just need to go back to the Bam Duncan dribble handoffs, right? Like I even go to like 16, 17 when he created that drive and kick game with Dragic and Dion. There was consistency to what they were trying to get to offensively. I don't know what the heck they're trying to get to offensively now from game to game, right? It's just,
I think they have to make that determination. Like, this is a huge offseason for them in figuring out the direction they go, because it's naturally a point where there's just a transition taking place. And I think that you could say, well, the transition took place when Jimmy got traded in February, but it's more of like, so then what does the next iteration of the Heat look like? And he may have been kind of beholden to the pace Jimmy wanted to play. And so that may, have something to do with where their offense landed and some of their pace. They play slow. They just do. Yeah. I don't know that they're going to get away from that.
Every year. And the other thing, Greg, about the pace is they've been a bad transition team forever.
Yeah.
Forever. And I again, some of this is talent. But also the coach has a say, and to some degree, in the types of players they go get. I know that he was in favor of bringing Rozier in. Okay. I don't think we were too. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody saw the drop off coming there, but they're not good in transition, and they bog down in the half court, and it's a consistent thing here. So that's why to get back to the original point here, and then on the other side of this, we'll get to kind of where this goes. And I want to get your thoughts on that. I think adding a voice who is not from the Heat culture lineage could be helpful here. I mean, I'm not even saying who you get rid of. That's not even the point here. I'm just like,
yeah, maybe you don't get rid of anybody. It's
maybe not, right? Like I just think they need somebody else who's going to challenge the way that they've done things offensively, because it's not working. I mean, defensively, yeah, you could give Spo said this before the season. I mean, you give Spo pretty much anything, he's going to end up 9th or 10th in the league in defense at worst, right? And that's where they were this year. Again, until the postseason, where they're giving up an average of 127. But Cleveland, scored close to that during the regular season. But I mean, that was something else. But I'm just saying, like, just find a voice in there who's going to, you don't want, what is it, a cabinet of, I tried to say this the other day and I screwed this up, but like, presidential cabinet have some people who put guardrails, and I don't say that Spo needs the guardrails that the guy, needs, okay? He doesn't want any guardrails, but people are going to get mad at me for that. But I just think to have another voice in there to challenge on offense would be,
and a fresh voice. I think before we get to the break, I think that there is something to be said for, like, how does your effectiveness change when you're the same voice for a really long time? I think as we think about Popovich transitioning and where everybody went today with this, it's funny. It's like it was a coaching change to a president, and everybody kind of said, well, Spoelstra should do that. But you know what the inspiration behind it was? To get Pat out of his seat and to get Spoelstra into that seat.
Right.
And so it's interesting how that goes. But I do think that there's something to be said for, like, does not players tune you out? Because that's crazy to say. I think Spoelstra reaches guys. I thought that what they did with Davion and Kyle Anderson kind of talked a little bit about just seeing the way Bam and Tyler, Spo obviously is reaching guys, but it begs the question, like, does it become more effective if you have some sort of fresh voice that comes in with a perspective, and do they want that? I don't know. Do they need that? It's kind of looked like it.
Well, and the word I was looking for cabinet of rivals, right? That's the idea. It wouldn't. I want to make sure I'm saying that it doesn't mean everybody should, like, take the blackboard away from Spo. Don't do this. It's just about having a different voice in there at times. I want to get to the succession stuff you talked about, which we need to do full episodes on. But you're right about where this went today, and I'm just going to tell you that's really foolish because it's not what would end up happening anyway. I'm going to explain that in a second. Before we do, though, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at Water Cleanup. Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. Your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop, Water Cleanup of Florida. Reach out to them, based in Boca Raton, but they service everything south. Don't worry about that. More than 200 5-star reviews on Google. They can do the preventative maintenance, but they also do the leak detection, the damage assessment, and everything else along the way. They're also huge Miami Heat fans. They suffered with you during the postseason. Michael and Robert, their whole team, they will take care of you. So reach out to them. It's WCUFL.com, WCUFL.com. If you've got the schmutz,
they got the guts.
Okay, so I know that narrative. That narrative is people are, and again, this is the social media, maybe vocal minority, maybe a little bit closer to majority after you lose a series like that, but still.
Stephen A. Smith said it.
Stephen A. doesn't even know how they operate. Okay, so just saying, he's going to be president anyway, and he's perfect to be president because he doesn't know how anything operates, and that's the presidents we choose. I did it again. I didn't say which party. Anyway, it's the off season.
That's a 2028 problem.
I don't really care anymore. Okay, so just throw some tariffs on it, and that's all. Everything will be good. Okay, so back to the point here. Stephen A. doesn't know what their structure is when he talks about that, but there are fans, okay, who just want Pat out at this stage, right? They tend to be the really, really young demographic, born in 2000 or later, right? So grew up
like younger than
Alex. Okay, right. Alex is the barometer, right? Like maybe a little older than Brady, a little younger than Alex. Okay, so and their solution is, well, just throw some Spo on the front office, right? And let's get Pat out. Now I can tell you, okay, that the idea of Erik Spoelstra going to the front office is not a crazy idea. I can tell you, I would not be surprised if he ends up being the public face of the organization, even though, as I've said before, Nick Harrison has had final say since 2011, which, by the way, included 2 championships and was it 5 finals appearances, right? Since that time, he's had final say. Okay. Obviously, Pat has been heavily involved in decisions and has been the face of the public face of the franchise. Now, there have been others who talked about maybe Shane was going to be before, he sort of moved to the background. He's still consulting, but not in a significant way. And the thought of Erik Spoelstra being the face for free agents, since he's more contemporary and is doing USA basketball now and all those other things, does make some sense. But it has not been presented to me that if that ever happens, that Erik's necessarily going to stop coaching.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to make that part clear. Okay. And he could stop coaching, and then Chris Quinn right now is positioned to take over internally, but it hasn't been positioned to be that that's necessarily what would happen. But also this idea that it's like this elixir, okay, to just put Spo in charge of the front office as if things would be dramatically different when this front office has operated sort of like a collective for a long time, again, with Nick having the final say on it.
But even that final say that could be swayed, because like,
right.
I don't think that everything that he wants to do just because he has final say that they go ahead and do. Like they still
there are
have
a couple of
major
decisions I know that he was not the one pushing for. Okay, so yes, again, it's a collective. They come to a decision. There's mutual respect inside that front office. They've worked together for a very long time. We can argue with the results if you want to. That's fine, but I'm just saying that's the way they operate. But this idea that everything would dramatically change when the reality is Erik Spoelstra has had some say during this period of time. I do know, as I said earlier, that he was cool with the Terry Rozier move and other moves along the way. Would things be completely different? Would he maybe assert himself more into these conversations and make more demands if he had that, if he was given the public face, perhaps. But I don't think it's like the fans think it would be. The reality is this front office is going to operate the way it's typically operated. Okay, as long as one of the people who's involved there is in charge. If they brought in somebody or perceived to be in charge, if they brought in somebody from outside, okay, like people were saying, like a Bob Myers, then yes, the front office would look totally different. Are they ever going to do that? No. Okay, so I just think this idea again that, well, okay, Spo's going to go to the front office, Quinny's going to take over as the coach, and they're going to start doing things completely differently. I don't think that's accurate. I know that the one major shift, there were some shifts that Spoelstra put in over time after he elevated and then gained some, obviously, credibility as the head coach, particularly after winning championships, that involved, like, for instance, the changing of sort of their development structure and also the assistants. Okay. He has much more say over the coaching staff than he did when essentially he inherited Pat's assistants, who were older, okay, at the time of his hiring. So there have been changes and shifts in that regard also. And I know that Pat and Spo don't agree on everything, and they've acknowledged that over time. But again, they come to decisions on that. So I guess I'm trying to make the point here that, and I know it's a long-winded way of putting it, and I'm trying to make the point here that Erik Spoelstra is going to be involved in the way this organization operates, okay? But he has been already. And it may just end up being that he's given a secondary title and he's the public face when I'm saying whenever Pat shifts out, and he's the public face when they meet with free agents and all that kind of stuff. And I'm curious to see how he handles that, because he doesn't seem to like dealing with the extra media stuff that may require or any of the show that may require. But he'll be the public face. And again, as long as the Arison family is in charge, Nick is going to have final say and be cooperating with Spoelstra, with Andy Ellisberg, with Adam Simon, with Mickey Arison, as long as these people are here. So I don't want fans to overreact to what a title changes. I mean, Andy's gotten a different title in the past, was a year and a half,
and
right?
been elevated. Yeah.
And been elevated. Has Adam gotten a title change? I'm not sure. I just know they've been able to retain him because there definitely is interest in him around the league. So we will do the full Succession episode. I didn't plan to kind of get into it here, but I think it is relevant because Erik Spoelstra at this point seems to be a Heat lifer, just like Gregg Popovich was a Spurs lifer, and Pop went the other way. Pop went from front office and then kind of took over when Tim Duncan came in and became the head coach and developed a reputation. When Pop, people forget this, when Pop replaced Bob Hill way back when, there was a lot of talk that it was kind of bogus because he was just a front office guy who wanted to coach Duncan. Okay. Pop didn't have this reputation at the very beginning, and Tim Duncan helped him get this reputation, and then over time he earned the reputation. Also, when Gregg Popovich didn't have the level of player, they didn't succeed to the same level. And I want to get to this and let you take it from here. There have been some out there on social, and Spo has, I think, the majority of the fan base behind him still. Okay, but there are some who are back in the Fire Spo camp. And they want to see things done completely differently. It's not about adding an offensive voice. It's not about it's just they just want to change. Okay, they don't think Spo had a good year. They don't think he's had a couple of good years. And one of the things that's been pushed out there, maybe this has come out more from national and to the locals, is this idea that I saw something today, a tweet. Erik Spoelstra has never won a playoff series without Jimmy Butler or LeBron James. Okay. Now, what do you make? What's your reaction to that? Because you're sort of rolling your eyes and shaking your head. What's your reaction to that tweet?
I think coaches don't win playoff series without great players. Duh. Like I don't want to look into it too much. It's kind of cherry picking the fact that like Spoelstra's early years were with kind of middle of the pack Dwayne teams that weren't going to probably win those series. And then he obviously had the big three era. And Jimmy was a big part of the next build. Like, I don't think that that's a way of holding stuff against him. I think he is universally acknowledged, not just by other coaches and front offices, but by players like Team USA. Like, he's the second guy on the bench behind Kerr there. Not behind, but sitting next to. I think that it's kind of been established that he's kind of the next guy in that line. If Steve Kerr were to ever look differently at what he wants to do, and I think that matters. Like the Team USA coaching hierarchy, the players perk their ears up at where guys land and stuff like that. So to me, I think it's a little ridiculous to go to the point that they like need a new head coach. Who the hell are you going to bring in? Spoelstra would get hired faster than you could. Like he couldn't pull out of the parking garage and he would already be hired with like the highest paying job in the sport. And it may not, who knows, maybe it wouldn't even be in the pros. It would be in college or something crazy like that. But ultimately I don't like the idea of talking about the great players have made Spoelstra a good head coach, because like you could do that crap with Phil Jackson because he had some bad years with some other teams in New York specifically. And I don't think it's fair to do that to him either. So I discount that kind of stuff. I don't think it's the right way of looking at it.
By the way, I want to correct that tweet, unless I read it wrong, but he did win a playoff series without either of them. He won the purple shirt series.
the purple shirt guy series.
Right. So he did win that series. That was 2016.
You got to go back and get that tweeter.
Well, let me see. Or maybe I read it wrong, which is very possible. But I might have forgotten it. But it stuck out.
Maybe they said Dwayne too, because of course you're never going to win if you don't have good players.
well, the thing is, if you go back and you think about it, like you said, the first 2 years with Dwayne, like that series against Atlanta, I guess they could have won that one. That was that weird series where every game was a blowout. Every game was a blowout.
And the home team won every game, I think.
Yes. I remember actually, not to name drop, but I was actually watching that game at a party that Jason Taylor had at some pizza place in Davie. And I think they lost by 38 or something like that. And then they won the next night by 40. That was the way that it was that home road series where it just went that direction. The Boston series, they were way overmatched in that series.
Yeah, that wasn't even a close series. Dwayne
that's one where Dwayne afterwards said, "This is the last year I'm going out in the first round." He basically said, "Get me some help." I remember I was in Boston and he was at the podium. Basically, that was the series where he benched Beasley in the last game. Like this was, and then you go beyond that, of course, the big 3 years. All right, 14-15, nobody was winning with that team, not after Bosch's situation. 15-16, they won a playoff series. They could have won another one if they hadn't fallen apart health-wise. I'm talking about Bosch and Whiteside, right? Then there was one series that they lost to Philadelphia in the first round. That's what we're talking about, right? And then
the Winslow Ben Simmons series.
Look at that series. Come on. It's a toss-up, but still. And then since then. Okay, so then they got Jimmy. Like seems pretty silly to me. I guess the overall point is this, and we are accused of being Spo homers, right? Spomers. Call us Spomers, okay? But I think it's fair, and he has gotten a little edgier about stuff when people come at him than he used to because, obviously he's more established. He even said, bring it. Okay. We deserve the criticism.
Yeah. And
Bring
he
it.
gestured
He went like
yeah,
this. He
bring it to
gestured
me.
like this. Bring it.
It's a very Pat Riley move. Like I remember him in the Garden when he said let it rain down on him. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Bring it. Right. So I wish we'd clip that. So he's gotten a little bit more combative in that regard over the years, which is, what happens with age. Just don't give a bleep anymore. I can tell you, someone who's in the same decade as Spo in terms of when I was born, but also, I think he's gotten more confident about what he can do. And that doesn't mean he won't self-evaluate though. And I think that needs to happen this offseason. And he said it, so he's not ducking it, but I think that he needs to get even more out of the box. Okay. And there's so much that goes into coaching. And I remember he told me once, and this was during the Big Three era, he said that 75% of coaching is managing personalities. So if you're to take that at face value, that he still believes
right.
that.
I mean, who am I? But I think he's right.
Well, in that case, 75% of managing the sports 5 Reasons Sports Network is managing personalities. It ain't podcasting. You see what we deal with on our Off the Floor Discord. Okay, if that's the case, then this year he was consumed because that's basically what he was charged with doing, okay, was managing someone who did not want to be there, and you did not know if he was going to be there from game to game, and managing all the other pieces around it. So I will say this, okay, he gets mostly a pass from me on the results this year, but he's right. He needs to look at himself because the transition offense needs to get better. The half-court offense needs to get better. We said, I think bringing in a voice from the outside is not the worst idea. Okay. And I think also, I think that the way he manages the rotation over the course of the season, I've always defended him on this because he waits to use certain guys. It seems like a month after us idiots and even the fans identify it, he'll end up making the move that we said to make. And then I've always said, okay, well, maybe, and it works. And the fans are like, see, he should have done this earlier, but there is a case to be made for the fact that he waited until the player was ready or the team was ready to accommodate that switch. I've always given some, right. But I think he does need to do certain things a little quicker. I mean, this year, you mentioned it. The one thing that is just crazy was how much he was playing Rozier. Crazy. And I don't know the backstory on that. I don't believe the front office was telling him to do that, because I know that there was some in the front office who thought he should have been out of the rotation in November. So that, Ethan,
if he was a 10-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, former champion, and Spo said, I'm sticking with this guy because I'm sticking with him, I would have got it. But
if you're Dwayne doing that, but
yeah.
Okay, but the guy was, look, I don't know what he was dealing with. I don't know if it was the neck. I don't know. I have no idea. Okay. I mean, obviously there was some stuff off the court that got out into the public swirl this year, and who knows? Okay. He didn't speak to the media. Rozier didn't, in the exit interviews. So we hadn't had a chance to speak to it. Okay. At least other than maybe one time during the season, I saw some quotes toward late in the season, but he was one of the worst players in basketball this year. There's just no way around it. Like, all the metrics show that. And yet there were games he was playing 40 minutes and the entire fourth quarter when it was already established that he was playing at that poor level. And I just I'll never really know. Well, maybe I'll find out eventually, but I to this point, I don't know why that was happening. Like literally just throw Josh Christopher out there and see what you got. Like, it could not have been worse. Okay. So that's the one thing where I'm like, okay, pass for the season, managing personalities, almost impossible, not given a great roster, lots of transition, having to get the new faces in there and all that kind of stuff, still managed to get them to win the 2 play-in games because they're stubborn as hell, right? What do you say, irrational and all the rest of that? Okay. And the Cleveland series, all right, Cleveland's much better than them, whatever. Passes for all that. I don't understand why you play Terry Rozier so much. That's the one thing where I'm like, that's a much bigger deal than the one time out in Detroit. Okay. And that's, I think that sometimes
because it went on for so long too. And it just was also, he usually finds a moment and Brady has talked about this. He finds like an opportune moment to make a lineup switch and go away from a guy and shelve him for a little bit. And you thought that was coming so many times and it never did. And it just was out of character. But again, if he's having to handle personnel and manage personalities, this was the year where that was going to absolutely suffocate everything else you were trying to do.
Yeah, and look, they needed creation, and theoretically, you're like, okay, this guy was brought in to bring you creation. All he was creating though was like one-legged off-rhythm jumpers and turnovers, and you're just kind of like, okay, where are we going with this? So the hope is they get him more talent, okay, or at least pick a direction where the talent is developing. And the one other thing I do want to say, and then we'll get close, and we'll do another episode on this, okay. Other than Davion Mitchell, who came here late and played at a much higher level than he's played anywhere else, and where obviously playing more earlier and showing some things, Spo pulled him out of the last game, but whatever. The development didn't really happen with some of the others we were hoping it would. Jaquez in particular, okay? I know he had the ankles and the stomach and all that. Jovic was tough because of the in and out, but the pop that you wanted to see from certain did not happen this year to the degree it has happened in past years. So again, was that from outside circumstances? I'm not sure, but they got to get back to, again, creativity, development, okay, a little more flexibility on changing things up quicker if it's not going well. Those would be the key things I think you look at this offseason. But yes, he's going to remain the head coach. He should remain the head coach. Everybody who says no, just shut the hell up. Anyway, have a good day.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.